and millions of people visit Graceland every year, but there is one door that has remained bolted shut since 1977. We were always told it was out of respect for the king, but a recently discovered ledger hidden in the attic suggests the Presley family was actually hiding a massive mistake, one that nearly cost them everything. When the news of Elvis Presley's sudden passing broke, the world stopped in its tracks. But behind the wrought iron gates of his Memphis mansion, a very different kind of panic was taking hold. A panic that had absolutely nothing to do with grief, and everything to do with a catastrophic financial blunder that threatened to erase his legacy overnight. For decades, the second floor of Graceland has been the ultimate holy grail for music historians and pop culture obsessives alike. If you take the VIP tour today, you are strictly confined to the ground level, the basement billiard room, and the famous Jungle Room. The official line from Graceland Enterprises is airtight and heavily rehearsed. They state that the upstairs was Elvis's private sanctuary in life, and it remains his private sanctuary in death. It is the place where he spent his final hours, and out of reverence for his memory, no camera, no tourist, and almost no staff member is allowed past the velvet rope guarding the staircase. But human psychology dictates that the moment you tell someone they cannot look at something, it becomes the only thing they care about. Rumors have swirled for nearly 50 years. Some claim the rooms remain exactly as they were on August 16, 1977, right down to the last record left on the turntable and the books on the nightstand. Others whisper about secret vaults containing unreleased master tapes. But the truth, pieced together from a dusty, forgotten cardboard box tucked away in the highest, least visited crawlspace of the mansion, points to a terrifying legal reality. The silence wasn't entirely about mourning. It was a calculated, desperate holding action designed to prevent the total liquidation of the Elvis Presley estate. To understand the sheer gravity of what was found in that attic space, you have to realize just how precarious the king's empire was at the time of his death. The public saw a rhinestone-clad titan of industry, a man who gave away luxury Cadillacs on a whim to complete strangers and lived like modern American royalty. The reality behind closed doors was a rapidly deteriorating cash flow nightmare. By the mid-1970s, Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's notoriously controlling and enigmatic manager, had negotiated a series of disastrous, short-sighted deals to feed his own staggering, off-the-books gambling debts. One of these highly publicized deals involved selling off Elvis's entire back catalog of RCA masters for a mere fraction of their actual long-term worth. But the newly surfaced attic ledger, a mundane-looking accounting book bound in cracking red leather and filled with handwritten columns, reveals a secondary, deeply hidden transaction that defied all legal and financial logic. According to the meticulously recorded ink entries in this ledger, the colonel had quietly collateralized the actual physical contents of Graceland's second floor. This included Elvis's unreleased private acetate recordings, his extensive personal jewelry collection, and highly sensitive private documents. Parker leveraged all of this against an enormous, undocumented high-interest loan from a shadow syndicate of Las Vegas casino executives. This was the fatal mistake. It was a silent, unrecorded lien against the most valuable, intimate artifacts of the 20th century. If these creditors found out the exact inventory of what was sitting upstairs, they had the legal right to march into a Memphis with a court order and strip the mansion bare to recoup their massive losses. When the executors of the estate, initially Vernon Presley and later Priscilla, took over the monumental task of sorting through the finances, they found this ledger and were instantly terrified. They realized that opening the second floor to probate appraisers, let alone the general public, would immediately trigger a microscopic audit by these aggressive shadow creditors. The only way to survive the fallout was to declare the entire upper level a sacred, untouchable exclusion zone. Now, you might think the logical step would be to fight this absurd collateralization in court. Surely, a federal judge would nullify a predatory loan signed under duress or obfuscated by a manipulative, arguably fraudulent manager. But probate law in the late 1970s was a notoriously messy, unpredictable battlefield, and the Presley estate was bleeding cash at an unsustainable rate. In 1979, the entire estate was valued at roughly $1 million, but incredibly, it faced an impending IRS tax bill of over $10 million. A drawn-out legal war over the contents of the second floor would have required massive legal fees and forced the immediate fire sale auction of Graceland itself to cover the mounting costs. Instead of fighting a losing battle in the courtroom, the family executed one of the most brilliant, counterintuitive strategies in the history of celebrity estate management. They weaponized grief. By locking the upstairs doors and citing profound emotional respect for the fallen icon, they effectively blinded the creditors and the IRS simultaneously. You cannot repossess an asset if its very existence and appraised value are shrouded behind a wall of intense public mourning and impenetrable public relations. This maneuver shifted the global narrative from a humiliating, tabloid-ready story of a financially manipulated artist drowning in secret debt to a touching, universally understood tribute to a legendary figure. In doing so, they bought themselves the most valuable commodity of all: time. They secured the time needed to open the downstairs to the paying public in 1982. They bought the time required to generate the tens of millions in ticket sales necessary to quietly pay off the IRS, and even more quietly, settle the phantom debts recorded in that attic ledger without anyone catching on. The massive mistake of the hidden collateral was effectively neutralized by the sheer power of modern mythology. And millions of people eagerly paid the admission fee just to stand near the bottom of the staircase, completely unaware they were actually funding a covert financial rescue mission. The forbidden nature of the second floor became Graceland's most powerful economic engine, proving that sometimes the absolute best way to hide a catastrophic vulnerability is to place it on an untouchable pedestal in plain sight. Let us look at the technical mechanics of this cover-up, because the contents detailed within that red leather ledger are nothing short of explosive for music history. The accounting entries detail specific items that were promised as collateral, items that music historians and obsessive collectors have spent decades desperately looking for. Page 42 of the ledger specifically lists a collection of 72 private acetate discs recorded in the upstairs bedroom studio. These were not the polished, overproduced RCA studio tracks that dominated the radio. These were raw, unvarnished jam sessions featuring Elvis covering obscure gospel tracks, outlaw country anthems, and even contemporary hard rock songs of the mid-1970s, entirely stripped of the heavy orchestral overdubs that rigidly defined his later career. The ledger assigned an arbitrary, absurdly low collateral value to these recordings, treating them like scrap plastic and completely ignoring their astronomical cultural and commercial worth. Furthermore, the ledger details a series of promissory notes signed with blank payee lines, essentially functioning as bearer bonds secured by the physical assets of the master suite. If the estate had allowed an independent inventory, as is standard and usually legally required practice during probate, these acetates would have been seized, auctioned off to the highest bidder, and scattered into private collections across the globe, lost to the public domain forever. To execute this massive cover-up, the executors had to creatively bypass standard legal procedures. They utilized an obscure loophole in Tennessee state law regarding the immediate preservation of a decedent's primary residence to delay the appraisal. They formed a remarkably tight inner circle of trusted confidants. Only a select few were ever allowed upstairs. They were not sent up to clean or preserve the rooms as a museum, but rather to carefully catalog, hide, and secure the physical assets mentioned in the ledger, ensuring that absolutely nothing left the premises. This required an unprecedented level of operational security for a civilian residence. They essentially turned the Graceland mansion into a fortress, guarding against not just zealous fans trying to climb the fences, but process servers, aggressive debt collectors, and federal auditors looking for any crack in the armor. The absolute genius of this defensive maneuver becomes undeniable when you compare it to the chaotic, destructive aftermath of other massive celebrity estates. Look at the tragic, piecemeal liquidation of M. Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch, or the chaotic, highly public auctioning of Prince's Paisley Park assets in the immediate years following his unexpected death. In those unfortunate instances, a lack of clear, unified strategy and an overwhelming avalanche of aggressive creditor claims forced the rapid monetization of deeply personal artifacts. Family members quickly lost control of the narrative, and corporate entities swooped in to coldly parse out the legacy item by item to satisfy outstanding debts. The Presley estate successfully avoided this precise, humiliating fate because they intuitively understood the immense psychological and legal leverage of a closed door. By hiding the massive mistake in the attic and locking down the primary source of the collateral, they created an artificial scarcity of information that paralyzed their legal opponents. Another fascinating parallel can be found in the high-stakes art world, where the families of deceased master painters will often deliberately hold back thousands of canvases in secret, climate-controlled storage. They release them slowly over decades to meticulously control the global market value and avoid crushing estate taxes. The Graceland strategy was fundamentally the exact same concept, but executed under the burning, unforgiving spotlight of global media scrutiny. They successfully transformed a terrifying legal liability that could have ruined them into the ultimate symbol of enduring, romanticized mystique. The fact that this strategy held up for decades, remaining firmly in place long after the underlying debts were secretly cleared, is a monumental testament to the ironclad discipline of the estate's management team. The locked door at the top of the stairs is no longer just a shrine to a departed cultural icon. It is a monument to the greatest financial sleight of hand in entertainment history. The red leather ledger found hidden in the dusty Memphis attic proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Presley legacy was inches away from being completely dismantled and sold to the highest bidder in the Nevada desert. The profound mistake of trusting the wrong management nearly erased the physical history of the king of rock and roll. But through calculated silence, a strategic legal blockade, and the brilliant weaponization of a grieving global public, the estate pulled off a miraculous financial recovery. Graceland stands today not just because Elvis lived there, but because his family knew exactly what to hide in the shadows to protect it from the vultures. Yet, the story of Colonel Tom Parker's catastrophic financial mismanagement does not end at those famous musical gates. In fact, a recently declassified FBI file suggests the Colonel's massive gambling debts were just a convenient cover story for a much darker, highly organized international operation. If you want to know the terrifying truth about who is actually pulling the strings of Elvis's final, exhausting tour, and where that money really went, you need to watch this next breakdown right here.